All right, so I sent out the draft for the recommendation letter that we're gonna finalize today, just now as part of the meeting invite. So you should see that come through any minute now. But I will turn it over to Jen and Michelle to kind of like formally kick us off before we jump into the letter.
All right, good morning. Happy Monday. Happy new advisory board day and time. Um, let's see, we have one, two, three, four, five. Am I counting five? Two, three, four, five, six. Do I count six? Is that right? Six members?
Katie, you remember, yeah?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that's seven.
Sweet, we have a forum. Yay. Or quorum. We'll have lots of minutes that we'll have to review.
Yep, we will. Last month's will be very, very small because it will just be like, we met, we discussed our new meeting cadence, and then we left,
Yeah.
essentially. So I'm going to share my screen. Is there anything else anybody has that they need to discuss before we start working on the letter?
Did everybody get the letter? I just got it.
Well, and I'm going to share it here. And if I need to make this bigger, let me know. I know not everybody's a fan of the screen share.
All right. Should we just kind of go line by line?
We can definitely do that. Y'all let me know when you're ready for me to continue to scroll.
I think you can scroll down. This part's all pretty standard, I think.
It is. And so I think it's important to just kind of frame how we set up this letter. They're all going to be kind of, excuse me, set up the same way of like we identified this need and gave just a little background of how we came to that conclusion that this was a need, and then like our proposed solutions and which one like we say like this is our proposed solution.
Are we identifying our highest priority, second, third?
Like with the one, two, three,
Yeah.
we actually did it backwards.
Okay.
And the reason we did it backwards is because we think that like one and two we can absolutely achieve. And three is going to be like, while it's our priority, we really want this to happen. It's going to take a lot more time, energy, and money to make it happen.
Okay.
So what I'll say is all three of these that we put forth are the high priorities or medium high priorities we identified over the last few months.
On the second line, should we say instead of personal, maybe like um jurisdictional or
I like that. I could spell.
I like that. Can we also add um, identifying calendar days versus months?
Yes. You want this at the very end, or you may put it up here somewhere else?
I would say just right there is fine. Like, additionally, jurisdictions differ in identifying expiration dates according to 90 calendar days versus 3 months.
Sorry,
No
say that again.
months.
It takes me a second to process.
Jurisdictions differ in identifying expiration dates as counted calendar dates versus, I don't know how to say that right, versus months. So like January 3rd to March 3rd versus January 3rd to March 1st, because some months have 31 days. I don't know how to say that right.
I get what you're saying. Anybody else have a suggestion on how to word that?
I don't on that, but that sentence also when court-ordered medications are entered as part of the certification process, that sentence is hard to follow, just grammatically and structurally. So I'm wondering if that could maybe be. I'm trying to think of a way to fix it. I really really wish I'd had a printed out form. Um, let me look at that further because it's just a sentence that's not quite clear, and I think that's what's leading to some of the other issues.
I would
Samantha?
move,
have a
I would
proposed
move
fix.
the in-between certification order dates and just let that sentence go and then put that at the end. When
I
court
think
medications are ordered as part of the certification process, expiration dates may no longer be aligned.
I think the better solution is to move in between certification order dates to after ordered. Also, when court-ordered medications are ordered in between certification order dates as part of the certification process, expiration dates are no longer aligned and create process barriers to care.
Agree.
All right, sorry, say it one more time. I'm sorry, guys. I am not an auditory person, so it's really hard for me to
So move
quickly.
in between certification order dates right after the word ordered earlier in the sentence. We could remove as part of the certification process entirely as well, but
We can do that. That's fine. Better?
That's much clearer.
Okay.
Yes.
What about this last sentence? Ooh, I like that. This one. Interesting.
Yeah.
What else?
I think that, oh, Samantha.
I say someone's got their hand up.
I was just gonna ask, is this a time to mention potential other solutions, or should that be something that we work on over the course of the time after this letter moves forward?
Not following. So we do have like potential solutions in the
Right.
letter.
Right. A potential solution to this came up in a different meeting for a different group I was in recently.
Okay.
And so, but that does not mean it needs to go in this letter, but it may be worth this group discussing. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out if this is the time to mention that it came up, or if I should just hold my peace and bring it up at another time, since this
I
is
would say let's hear what it is, but let's not get into a big long discussion of what it is. Let's just hear what it was.
Sure. One of the county attorneys who does 2765 in a large county suggested having a court liaison dedicated to 2765 would be really helpful. There are court liaisons dedicated to some other issues, but there is not like a court liaison whose job is to support courts with 2765.
Where would that position live?
Court liaisons live with judicial
Okay.
somewhere. That is the extent of my knowledge of the organizational
Fair.
structure of judicial.
Yeah, I mean, I have like additional, like, is that per court? Is that just a single liaison for the whole state? Like
I
those kinds
think
of.
that's what it is it's someone who works for state judicial to support each local court in their practice around a specific complicated issue.
Okay. So we have something similar. We have like the single entry point as part of our solution. Do we want to call it out that it would be a judicial liaison?
Maybe, and also I don't know that the judicial liaison's job would be like managing a single entry point so much as like
Okay.
support reports and I also do not have strong opinions about this potential solution because I just recently heard about it. But it did come from someone where like this is the work they're doing all the time, and I trust that. So
Sounds good. All right, looking at proposed solution. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, edits.
Quick question, and with that point of entry, does that point of entry already exist, or would that have to be a new creation?
It would have to be a new creation.
On the third line after the period, I think that should be this instead of the.
It might be a good idea to separate into two paragraphs that solution just because there's two separate ones, just to make it a little bit clearer.
Where would you like it separated?
Let me look at that. It's hard to see on this little tiny screen. Hold on.
After expectations, I think. In the
Here.
Yeah, probably.
did we want to add the judicial liaison piece?
You could put that as a possible entry point. So the entry point, which could be a judicial liaison.
You want to say like an example of this could be a judicial liaison?
Or dedicated judicial liaison?
What other, I mean, is this like being developed, or this was just a discussion that maybe that would be a good idea?
My understanding is it was just brought up as an idea.
It was brought up as an idea. Uh, yeah, someone was advocating for it in a different conversation about similar issues. And you know what? She even suggested combining it with a couple other processes that are similar in civil court. Let me see. She suggested combining 2765, 2781, and then 25.510.216, which is imposition of legal disability for individuals with IDD. Like, since all of those are sort of processes by which civil courts remove individuals' rights, and they sort of tend to like fall into the same buckets, the suggestion was that like a specific position to support courts in those processes when some of them are kind of uncommon and all courts are doing them a little bit differently would be really helpful.
Is this built off this Senate Bill 23-229, statewide behavioral health court liaison office?
Not that I know of, although I'm not super familiar with that bill, so that may be related. I can look
Let
it
me
up.
put this in the chat. Oh, thanks, Taylor. She's one step ahead of me. Sorry.
So since it's not clear, is it possible to just add something in that says in a way that's similar to, or I'm not sure how to word that, but to make it so that it's a court liaison, a dedicated court liaison in a way that's similar to what's currently done with, I'm not sure so 2765 or 2781, how are those different? I'm not super familiar with 2781.
That's substance use.
Okay,
That's the
so
substance use
and there
piece.
is, so I'm asking, is there a dedicated liaison for that?
No,
Okay, so which one are you saying there is one? Or what is the process that I'm not following what you're saying, Samantha?
I don't think there is one. I think that's the proposed conversation that came up.
Okay, that makes more sense.
And
So
then my question would be, does this mean every county in the state would have a designated 2765? Every region, every BASO, every judge?
No, so the idea is that judicial at the state level has a dedicated judicial liaison who then works as a liaison to the various courts to help improve their understanding and standardize their practice.
Beautiful.
And I know I'm looking to see if I can figure out what other areas have judicial liaisons. Because there are some. I mean, this idea didn't come from nowhere. Judicial's not my biggest area of expertise.
I think juvenile courts might.
What else on this section?
What if we, and my feelings will not be hurt if you put this down, but what if instead of saying another proposed solution or take out and the priority solution of this board, and then maybe put something to the effect of this board's recommendation would be a combination of the two if the board agrees that we like both solutions, training and a judicial liaison.
I think that would be good. Definitely a connection to the existing training if a court liaison were to be created dedicated to 2765, like it would be great if they could work with the existing trainers so the messaging is consistent.
So I guess first question, does everybody agree on combining the two as our proposed solution? Or prioritized solution, I guess I should say.
Combining the two, what?
Both the judicial liaison or single entry point and training.
That makes sense.
Anybody not agree with that? Okay. So then maybe just at the bottom of this, after mental health cases, maybe this board's recommendation would be be a combination of these two solutions. And then maybe in parentheses, training and
Training of an identified judicial liaison.
yeah.
Great, like they really looked into dinosaur. They actually have dinosaur bones there at least.
Anything else on this section? Okay, moving on to number 2.
After, on the third line after Colorado, I think that should be a comma instead of a period. And then lowercase.
Like that?
Yeah.
In that second to last sentence on the need, it says you have a the before terms. It's just to say terms. In terms of. There you go.
I think you should leave that as trainings. Computers don't know what they're talking about.
We recommend and request the BHA.
No, you'll get a ton of kickback if you try to do the
Really?
BHA. Oh my God, it's been a whole thing. We are BHA, not the BHA.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, it was a whole thing.
Um,
Just
Proposed
a
sol-
quick question, the curriculum that includes documentation, patient rights, and fulfilling court orders, is that standardized across, would that be standardized across all the jurisdictions?
Yes, that would
Yeah.
be the hope.
would it be okay to add in transportation responsibilities?
Well, I mean, there's other
Once they're decided on.
yeah, I was gonna say there's other entities that are working to revise that. So that might
But
be something we want to say put in the post-training right now.
I think it's open. I mean, if a responsibility is not to transport, that's one thing. If a responsibility is that they must transport, that's a different thing.
Right, so that they would need training either way, so that should be
Right.
in there. The
Right.
other thing that should probably say standardized
Which
curriculum.
line are we looking at?
It says revision of the so it should say revision of the curriculum, but it should say that somewhere in here that this is going to be a standardized curriculum across the state.
Oh, there you go. And then right above that, Jess, where it says post all caps, add standardized.
Right here, or no, this one.
Um, actually, you could do it in both, and the revisions of the standardized post curriculum. Because currently it's not standardized, so I wouldn't put it above because that says current post.
Okay.
It's not standardized. That's what they're moving to. So yeah, that right where you have it.
Do we need to add anything additional around like the training around 2765 also needs to be standardized, or are we just saying like post in general is being standardized?
Well, I mean, that's a really great question. I would hope that if BHA kind of collaborates with the AG's office and they put this together, that it would be standardized, but I don't see why you couldn't call that out. Include a standardized approach, yep, to documentation. Hmm.
If I could type that would be fantastic.
You're awesome. You do this on the spot with everyone staring at you.
That's the least of my worries. My fingers just like don't work. My brain always thinks faster than my hands can
Me
respond.
too. Me too.
Okay. Any other pieces to this proposed solution? Okay. This one we kind of went off the rails when we were meeting separately to make this draft. And so I think we need to talk this one through a little bit more because I do think we need to go back to the idea of this automation. When Michelle and I were working on this, it kind of was like, well, what if we did this instead? But so we should probably talk about that instead of just putting it in our recommendation letter. So let's start with the identified need paragraph, and then we'll start typing out the proposed solution for what an automated system would look like.
Think on the fourth line and inability. Yep, right there.
What do you want me to change it to?
Just add an. There you go.
The example is also confusing. I think that those two sentences are part of the same example, but it's confusing the way it's written. So you have, for example, there's no emergency medical services facilities in Gilpin County. Any person detained on an emergency medical hold would be that sounds like those are two
You just
separate
say
things.
therefore. Yeah, and
And
put a
I
comma and then therefore.
Yeah, therefore any person detained in Gilpin County, because otherwise it just sounds like everyone across the state, and we know that's not true.
Mhm.
Okay, there you go. That's clearer.
That has therefore two sentences in a row, which is
Right. And the last one, I think you could take off the therefore and the it appears. You could say this makes it appear that Gilpin County
I
or
recommend it as a
this issue.
result.
There you go.
As a result, yeah.
And you need to say it appears that Gilpin County on paper does not have any emergency mental health holds.
In the data, maybe.
Yeah, as I don't want to put on paper. As a result, it appears Gilpin County does not have any.
Per data or per statistics or per reporting or however they gather it.
Actually, that
Or when data is pulled or when statistics are reviewed, it appears.
situations. Okay.
I mean, and that's just one example. Like the other major one is how many M1s are done in ERs and then rescinded as soon as a safety plan is done. I mean, there are like 4 different examples we could put in here that would highlight where the numbers are missing.
I think we should.
And go ahead, Samantha.
Sorry, I just have a couple language things. I think we should remove the word annually where you just were now. I mean, it's not clear whether it refers to statistical reporting or
For annual
whatever.
statistics?
Sure, that's fine. But it's also per any statistics ever, right? Like,
Yeah.
I also disagree with the inability to identify because there are not articles in the previous items in that list. And so we should not have an article in that item.
Where are you looking?
The second sentence, however, this data has severe limitations,
Okay.
including we have 3 items in that list. All 3 originally did not have articles, and now we've added an article to the third one. For parallel structure, we should either have all articles or no articles, as long as we're being picky about language. So it should either, yeah,
What do you want it to say?
the word "and" was added before inability, and I disagree with that addition because of parallel structure. But
Want to take it back out?
I do, and I also don't want to offend whoever wanted it there. But I do believe
I'm not following what you're trying to do. Can you explain, Samantha, a little bit more?
sure.
You're
So-
talking about articles and I'm not following. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So this is a list of 3 things: low
Correct.
reporting compliance, misuse of the emergency mental health hold, and inability to identify specific service gaps. All
Okay.
3 should be presented in the same way in the list, and
Okay.
the other 2 don't have and or the or the at the beginning and wouldn't work with that. And so in order to have them all the same in the list, we don't need it here, and it removes that parallel between the 3 things in the list. This is
Gotcha.
what happens when former English teachers go into policy.
I was gonna say, like, I can see exactly where you're going because I'm like, I'm not an English major. I have no idea what you're saying.
Well, and articles means like 4 different things depending on, and as soon as you said English, I'm like, okay, there you go.
Yeah, articles as in at, and, or the.
Uh-huh, exactly. Not articles of incorporation, not articles of listing. Yes, yes, yes.
Not articles of statute. Yeah.
Not articles of that's where I was lost. I'm like, do these match
No.
up with one of the articles in the statute? Like, yes,
No,
okay.
I am not trying to go
We're
into
good.
the statutory
good.
underpinnings. I would also love if we could change the word severe in that same sentence to significant.
Like that word.
Sorry, I'm looking.
Significant limitations. Yeah. Thank you. I just spend my days trying to convince people to say serious mental illness instead of severe mental illness. So now I like notice that word everywhere.
Mhm.
I just have a question. The example of Gilpin County is not as broad as it might be to include the lack of reporting of ERs. So I'm kind of wondering if that might be actually an example you would want to include.
We
We
can do
do have,
both.
I would say we do have emergency medical departments under statute that are required to report. We just don't have a mechanism to hold them accountable to the statute.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I'm
But you're
what I'm
saying,
saying,
is that an example, though, of an M1 placed by a physician, which then has a crisis clinician conduct an evaluation and later place a safety plan?
and then they rescind it, right?
That should still be
But
reported though.
so the big thing on here is that, yeah, it should be recorded, but it's not being recorded in many cases. And that's a much bigger and broader example than just Gilpin County. So I'm just saying, like, as an additional example, that one is perhaps more relevant to more places. So I'm just saying maybe add that in as an example. I don't think avoiding that's necessarily a good idea.
This is one of the biggest recommendations, and I think the one that we kind of prioritize. So just, I agree. I don't think that it is harmful to add more examples and more robust explanation for this one.
Would you rather have that be the first example and then Gilpin be a nut like the second example?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bigger example. It's a more common
It's a more
example.
broad example that covers every county.
Mhm.
And sorry for being really late to this group's conversation around this, but um, another broad example that I think that we probably are all aware of is the inability to track distinct numbers for individuals versus kind of like the count of how many. And I don't know if that's something that you feel is okay to put in this or not, or if
Say
that was
more, Kevin.
discussed.
Distinct versus individual.
Well, so 30 M1 holds in Gilpin, if that was possible, uh, may only be one person versus 30
Oh,
people,
okay.
and there isn't any way to identify sort of like
Unique individuals versus
unique individuals. Yeah,
collective.
yeah, that was poor language on my part.
Well, so all of that is supposed to be reported in a disaggregate form. We have a lot of people pushing back on that right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's
Yeah.
some other stuff happening.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if it's something that you want to put out publicly that having the exact number of individuals is a desire versus or in inclusion to kind of what you're already getting.
Mhm.
So Kevin, that seems like an even more important thing from an individual patient's point of view. I know that when it's not reported multiple times for the same person, and when they're not keeping track of that, even across the state and not in individual emergency rooms, it becomes a huge problem of not getting care, even though the person might need care. Because if you show up in the emergency room 5 times in a year, that means you should have more
Care.
more robust care, and that's not getting tracked in
Yeah.
many cases.
Well, but it is. And so I think one of the biggest, most salient issues being the boots on the ground frontline person who knocks on a door and goes to an ER and sits in meetings like this. There is such a significant lack of communication between the bodies that be that so much of this could be resolved. For example, running my crisis agency, I had to report to my ASO every single crisis call I went at, what place of service we responded to, how long we were there, what our disposition was, so on and so forth. There were like 30 different touch points we had to report on at the end of the month. And the ASOs have all that data. And so when we talk about where are people responding to in crisis, the ASOs have that, which are now the BOSOs. So how can these two arms connect and get the data each other hold? That's
I think
huge.
I'll
So
also say, like, having recently harassed like every program at the BHA for data, that the fact that there is a possibility of individual data, like de-identified individual data with M1s, makes it really important and unique, right? Like 988 is never going to have individual data. We could have 27 calls from one person, and we're never going to know, and we never should know, because that would compromise the whole piece of the like confidentiality of 988. But emergency rooms and other medical facilities inevitably are going to have to be putting this information into an EHR, and so they can provide anonymized data that looks at individuals as well as aggregate information.
Yeah.
And so this is like our only chance to get that. And I also do wonder if there are times when someone is put on an M1 and not put into an EHR, and that concerns me too. And
Yes.
this may be a motivation to make sure that
Yes.
that these are being treated as actual like emergency medical situations by every emergency room in.
I can tell you they're not. I work with one hospital in specific that has a policy that every person that needs a crisis eval from a crisis clinician is placed on an M1 because that is the hospital's way to have security hold them until their crisis eval is finished. Over 50% of those M1s are then rescinded when crisis puts them on a safety plan. This is my big soapbox, is that if you want to know how many people are admitted to 2765 facilities every year, the data they're collecting is accurate. If you want to know how many Coloradans have their rights removed every year for a period of time, this is sorely underreported because they're rescinded and then safety plan. But for that period of time, which might be 48 hours, their rights are removed.
And Michelle, that example that you just gave, that it's like that emergency department's policy to utilize an M1 defeats the whole purpose of an individualized assessment. And like you said, so that is concerning to that way. That is not the spirit or the intention
Absolutely.
of an M1 in that way.
100%.
The other thing that I'd like to just say is that there's a referral platform for providers that look for the 2765 designated facilities for bed placement or bed tracker type system that's been built. If there was an electronic form of the M1 in that platform, it would increase the individualized records, but it would also tie into a platform that's hopefully and being encouraged to be utilized on the regular, to your point, Michelle, like by the BOSO. And that could have the ability, because computer people are very brilliant at figuring all that stuff out behind the scenes, what goes into discrete data fields and things like that can be pulled for reporting purposes, but it's already then in a mechanism that is being utilized by providers to try and find a placement or a referral, or at least it's getting into that system.
Right.
And so I think that in terms of like that random M1 being written by a field clinician, not getting into an electronic health record, could be solved by utilizing or associating it with this referral or this provider platform for referral.
Well, wait till you get 2 paragraphs down because it gets stickier, and we're going to be curious what you think.
Would automating M1s also contribute to making it easier to do the single point of entry solution that we mentioned for issue 1?
Not necessarily, because not all M1s end up in certification.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
But they may not end up in certification, but it could then help track and trend those that are being released where, and why.
See, and again, the
That
BASOs
be
have
part
all
of the
that.
DISPO.
Yep,
Well, I mean, do they get it from that
And
emergency
they do. It
department
is
that has that?
required.
now,
Yep. Every mobile crisis team is required to report their statistics on their calls, whether they are dispatched by the Colorado Crisis Line, whether they are internally dispatched by their own individual crisis line, or through 911. I guess 911 is the only one they're not supposed to report on. But even the duplicate versus the unique people. When I have someone we go out on 3 times in a month, it is noted this is the same person seen times 3. That's what I mean. There is so much data reported to the BASOs that were the ASOs. There's so much data. I wish that it could be utilized and disseminated, because here we are asking for data. I can tell you, I know for a fact it exists because we all report it as part of a credentialed, designated mobile crisis team.
But
And
is that
Michelle,
common for
sorry.
each so? I mean, I would hope that it is, but I'm wondering if region 1 is different from regions
Mm-mm.
2, 3, and 4.
Mm-mm. It is a mandate from the BHA to the ASOs. And the reason I know that, Joy, is because we would see, and Casey, I don't know what you were going to say, but you might be able to corroborate this too. We would get a quarterly report that compared our region to the other regions. So we knew how well we were doing. I knew how my team was doing compared to Casey's team in another county, but we also knew how our region was doing compared to other regions. I've got some of these reports I'd be happy to share out so you can see all the data points we reported. What were you going to
I'd
say?
love to see that, Michelle.
Yeah, I'd be happy
Yeah.
to.
And I would just say I agree that the data that is provided, I mean, it's very robust and it takes a huge amount of time from these crisis teams, right? And so I think something that would be great is the more we can utilize, because what I hear from my clinicians often is I spend all this time reporting this data, which does impact the community and the individual that you're going out and seeing. And if it was better utilized, it's just a better why, right? Like if it was utilized in a way that was more robust across the state to inform decisions and all of those different components, because I think Michelle's exactly right. There's a lot of great data in there. And yeah, the more we could utilize, the better.
What else needs to go in this identified need section? And then we can start formatting and formulating our thoughts for the automation.
So I just real quickly, do we do or do you, not me, but do you want to add to it the inability to track individual data?
I don't want to add it because that's the expectation now, is that it is individual. I think there's other concerns happening from entities BHA doesn't regulate, that there's HIPAA concerns and it doesn't fall under like that individual data is not protected by HIPAA. And so they can only report to us aggregate numbers is coming from the hospitals.
So I wonder if something might want to be added in, though, about the fact that, as Michelle was just saying, this data exists, but it's not being utilized. And that this automation would then allow it to be better at actually identifying those gaps.
We can put that under potential solutions for sure.
Okay,
We're just not
I
quite
was just
there.
saying you might want to mention it as part of the problem, that the gaps are not being identified because the information is not.
I
Well,
think
I
a
suppose
lack
that,
of-
oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I'm sure a lack of integration of these systems also leads to more different data reporting requirements for providers, which is both frustrating and time consuming for providers, and then leads to internal inconsistencies where if it gets reported slightly differently one place than the other, we have data that says two different things. And the more we can like integrate and make consistent, the more people will trust the data that's reported, and the more likely people will be to report as well.
Yeah, what I would propose is, I think this question of data is important, and I just wonder if we're missing an opportunity to be a little bit aspirational in this document. Because there are clearly practical concerns and like logistics of how you do this, but also, I just wonder, is it okay for us to say, hey, we would like something like this, and maybe the recommendation is, can we explore the details on what it would take to make it reality. And so I recognize that it's a big lift and it's hard for BHA. And also maybe this is the opportunity to challenge BHA to say, hey, this is a solution, or this is something that we need to figure out, notwithstanding that it's difficult. I don't think that we should let ourselves get hung up on some of the practicalities. We have to be a little bit cognizant of reality, but we don't have to solve that whole problem right now.
All right, so what are we adding and where?
Since I brought it up, I'll try and answer. But I think as an example, I'm just looking through this. I don't have specific language, but as an example, for one of the broad overarching problems is the inability to report distinct numbers or unique or numbers of unique individuals. I want to say it without including identifying information, because I recognize too that including identifying information is not something I think that the BHA should have. But the ability to track that in terms of numbers makes a lot of sense from a policy perspective. So, I'd go back to the example again, 30 M1 holds for one person looks like 30 M1 holds. And I think that would give us significant information that is useful. So
Trying to figure out how to word this into like a succinct, here's our problem.
could be better coordinated across systems. In order to identify accurate numbers of M1 holds across the state.
I'm trying to do on this last sentence is like, what are we seeing right now? So like ultimately current data collection practices are hindered by lack of system coordination, incomplete reporting, and
How about, and in its current form, the data is not being fully utilized to identify gaps in the system.
Appropriately utilized.
Possibly. I'm kind of wondering about appropriately sounds. I'm trying to think of another word for fully, because appropriately doesn't quite get it. Because it's not that it's inappropriate use that's being used right now. It's that the data, as I think as Michelle was talking about, is not, it's out there. It's just not compiled in a way that makes it able to be used.
It's ineffective currently.
There you go. So it's being ineffectively utilized.
You could also
And communicate it.
use the term lack of interoperability or lack of integration. Like that's the big thing with data, right? Is interoperability, and it's unfortunate we don't have some sort of HIE system for this. Like with Creo and QHN, which are all going under contexture, hypothetically that information could be in there if it's properly entered, but then you run into the issue, right, if it's not depersonalized. And so if someone's breaking the glass on it, they have to be authorized under 42 CFR to do it. But it'd be nice if, to the whole thing, if there was some type of HIE type mechanism where all this data appeared aggregately.
All right, so let's talk about what do we want this automation to require? What would it look like? How would it address some of the concerns that we raised? And because this one is like essentially blank, I'm going to ask that people speak slowly.
So this automation would require statewide, I'm trying to think how to word that. So statewide cohesion in how M1s are.
Yeah, what does automation mean exactly? I don't.
I guess that's a good place to start. So we want this to be. So what we've talked about in the past is that it would be essentially like a uniform place or a single system that would house all of the M1 hold data and information. So it wouldn't be just data. Like it would be, and this is where I get like myself caught up in the weeds of like, well, if it does get rescinded after you create it, like can people pull it out of the system and rescind it? Like, what does that look like? Like, so I have like those kind of like logistical kind of concepts in my brain. But the idea would be that it is kept essentially like in a single electronic health record system. Like, so the system is a singular place just for M1s.
All right, so switch that around. So the automation would require statewide cohesion around the process of applying M1 holds. Is that where we're going with that? Because I think Michelle brought up a really good point that there's different people putting M1 holds on for different things, and that this would coalesce that a little bit. I don't know how to say that. So I'm not sure.
We already kind of have that in place as far as like training around expectations of when an emergency mental health hold is appropriate and like the criteria under the statute. I think we're trying to get as we want a place for all of this to live.
Right, but currently, and I saw this as well with my daughter, and I've seen it with other patients as well, where even though there are criteria, even though the criteria is quite clear, what will happen is you get those ones that are placed and then rescinded, as Michelle was pointing out.
Right.
So that process, so that cohesion needs to be there in terms of having somewhere where all of it's reported so that it's very clear what's done, when it's rescinded, when it's placed, under what circumstances it's placed, when it's rescinded, so that all of that, I'm not sure how to word that, but that needs to be part of it.
Then maybe we need to talk more around what we want this system to look like?
I think to Scott's point, I'm still kind of hung up also on the automation portion of it and how we would automate sending this data into this system, including, discontinuing them. So I think, is that part of this discussion?
I mean, it could be. Sorry, Scott put something in the chat that I'm going to add in here. It's more than just legal status. It would be, we need to do something. We need to change that a little bit. Developing.
Patient's status under, yeah.
What else? Come on.
I know previously when looking at this, some of the feedback from like our health information technology folks were like looking at and getting that consultation and that perspective from what would be needed to build that type of system. And they were like, and that's where it gets technical that, front end users aren't as familiar with.
Joy, we can't hear you. You're not muted, but it's really, really quiet.
I'm sorry. I know when we were looking at this previously, it's talking with the information technology folks that it's like we would be seeking what they call like a discovery sprint, like from what technology, what their recommendation would be, or like estimates from their to like Chief Barden's point about like that interoperability and just having that level be brought in on the information technology front to help inform and guide how to make an automated system and what that may look like. Because I think, from a front end user point, we would like something automated, but it's like, what is really needed to help inform the cost and other things to that effect. And I wonder if that's worth putting in there, is just taking that step forward.
So what you're saying, Joy, is like that would be our recommendation, is to start the investigation process?
I mean, that will cost some money. I mean, to
Sure.
bring somebody in, but it won't be as much money or time consuming as, having that whole system brought in, or, to go make that leap. But I wonder if it's worthwhile putting that step in to recognize that, it may be something where it can be an incremental step instead of like jumping completely in. We can at least get a report of what the cost could be or an estimation. It's, just a thought.
Well, and I'll second that because I do data science and biostatistics and whatnot, and often the technical components of something like automating or generating a system like this is a lot more complicated than it might seem. Specifically, the automation portion of this is where my brain is getting hung up, and so that will be trickier than I think, oh, we're just going to have this system created and just roll it out. There's going to be a lot more thought that needs to go into that.
And Sean, really what automation means, I think in the bigger context of this, is currently M1 forms are PDFs that are like printed out in paper. And so any electronic submission or, computer entry is what the imagination is to make automated. So I think that if that helps in terms of where we're coming from, is from a paper pen format to 21st century solutions.
That makes more sense because in automated, I was thinking something of when the M1 happens or is rescinded, the system automatically gets updated, and that's very tricky. If it's just moving to an electronic version, that's easier. And I fully support that just because PDFs, as a data scientist, are notoriously hard to parse through and pull data from. Whereas if you have an electronic format, it's really easy to pull that data, generate reports, get analysis, everything that you need. So that makes a lot more sense, and thank you for clarifying.
And I think honestly, that's where it gets fallen off because the reporting is not always like we're then looking at the PDF, it's then submitted onto like a different form. Just if different. And it may even look different from what Michelle's point was with the reporting to the ASOs or now what's BOSOs. And so there's a lot of human interaction with that form and data that is in between the actual M1 form being filed and the data that's being collected. And so it would just be somewhat cutting out that middleman or that middle human in that reporting, at least. That it's just there's a lot of potential for gaps and miscommunication that can happen in the current system.
So, Joy, I'm wondering on this one if maybe make this a step-by-step process, and the first step in that process is a pretty simple one. Make this an electronic form that you have to fill out online. Then the next step in that is to then automate that reporting to a more centralized. So I think step one is when, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Sean, because I don't know that much about computers and how to standardize forms, but it seems like, one where it's, like you said, instead of being PDFs, and honestly, I've seen M1s that were handwritten. So making that something that has to go into a standardized online form.
Most
and then
all ones are going to be handwritten unless they're done in an ER. Then there might be part of an EHR. So that's the whole point, is how to make them all automated.
Well,
so
this
is where Jess and I had a long conversation of, do we provide the technology to every person who might be doing this? Or if I'm in the field doing crisis and I write up my M1 because I need the person now transported and that M1 has to be filled out before they are transported, when we get to the brick and mortar, whatever facility, based on what area I am in, it's an ER, a walk-in center, or whatever. When we get to that brick and mortar facility, do the brick and mortar facilities have the electronic versions that paper version must be converted into? Herein lies the sticky point of this.
Well, and more than that, like we're talking about, it has to be in like an online submission. People in the field might not have internet access.
Absolutely. That's why you're going to have a contingency plan for paper that has to somehow then be converted to electronic, whether it's rescinded or not. And most every every M1 in the field has to go someplace, whether it's an ER, a walk-in center, a CSU, they have to go somewhere. So does that somewhere then either upload or re-enter that M1? However, it has to be very specific that if I go to my local ER that they don't put that they're doing the M1, but they put me, the crisis clinician, as the one who initiated that M1 in the field, not in the ER. So you have to be very specific about the data that's entered so it's accurate.
I just want to keep us on track. We have about 15 minutes left. I do not have the ability to stay on afterwards past that time. I do have an 11 o'clock meeting I have to be in.
This is the stickiest part, I think, of the whole thing is how do you actually do it? And then to Scott's point, when Dr. Simpson said, let's not get in the minutia, let's let them figure that out. Do we do that here and just say, here's our suggestion, y'all figure it out?
Samantha?
I mean, this letter is just saying what we want to work on this year, right?
Correct.
I mean, isn't figuring it out part of working on it? Do we have to have
That's what I mean.
Otherwise, like, why keep meeting for the rest of the year if we're going to try and figure it out today and submit like a fleshed out solution in the letter? I think
I think we should
that also
offer to
supports-
be part of that.
Right. Well, and that supports some of what Joy was saying too, that like we might work on this all year and not have an automated system at the end of the year, but that doesn't mean we're not like contributing to the conversation and working towards an answer, even though we're probably not going to be able to solve this in this group in 1 year.
So then let's flesh this out. So we've got our first and priority recommendation would be investigating the requirements needed to develop a unified electronic health system for initiating, tracking, and terminating emergency mental health holds. The system would need to enable standardization of the entry form. What else?
Is the alternative solution an and or an or? It looks like an or.
We're not there
And
yet. We're not there yet. Let's hold.
okay.
Let's get this taken care of first. So in a perfect world, what do you want this system to do? Standardized form of entry. We'll be able to pull data from it. What else?
That can be used by any, what is the word, professional?
Intervening professional.
Intervening professional who is able to initiate an M1. In a perfect world.
This is a minor nuance, but any system like this generally will need some form of technical support. I, for instance, upload forms through SAMS or SPARS to SAMHSA. And whenever there's issues, especially with clinicians not understanding it or things like that, there's a lot of technical support needed, even if the system's working correctly.
What else do we want this potential solution to look like? How we're going to investigate, how we want to push BHA to investigate this further. What do we want BHA to do? We want BHA to connect with various data platform. Like, what do we want BHA to do to start this process?
Is the statewide computer database still even on the table for being conducted? There used to be Compass 10 years ago. They went away. There was a new one coming. Is that even still in the works that anyone knows of?
I haven't heard of anything.
Okay, never mind then.
Well, I mean, I guess when BHA needs to identify like an office or point person to work on the project to begin with, right? And develop a
Yeah.
plan. So I don't know if is there an office of IT or I don't know what's
We
There
have
is-
OIT,
Are-
but they are not specific to BHA. They house all of CDHS.
oh, no.
OIT is
Okay.
the entire executive branch. But OIT within the executive branch does have an office of e-health integration that's
Yeah.
been doing a lot of projects lately and also helping fund a lot of projects lately that I think would be an excellent partner for this kind of project.
And
Yeah.
there is that central depository for the friends and family informed consent. Oh, what is that? Gosh, Samantha, get that going now.
Samantha, what's that entity
The
called within
consent
OIT?
management from Office of eHealth. And then we were looking at the friends and family form for that input, and there's still that provider platform for referrals. So, which is separate from the OHI or the EHI, that office that Samantha just put in there, but that's a good place. Also, I wonder, ta-da, from our area, just in terms of collecting the data, I mean, maybe tech stuff for us in that end.
And we can have some ongoing conversations, perhaps, about like the extent to which various teams at the executive branch level and at the department level should be supporting this. I feel like data and technology is one of those places that BHA doesn't need to be totally autonomous. And I know how much work the people doing those things are already doing, but they do really good work. And so, yeah, I think those need to be ongoing conversations.
We want to say we want a task force.
Say that again?
Do we want to say we want a task force on this? What do we want? I mean, we could say like we want you to investigate what this looks like. I mean, that could be done in a one meeting technically, and just due to budget constraints, people would be like, and we're dead in the water. What do we want this to actually look like in practice? What do we want the ongoing conversations to look like?
I think we need to be careful how big of the ask if we want it to actually take place. Because if it's unrealistic, they're just going to roll their eyes.
For sure. But at the same time, this is our recommendation letter. We can recommend whatever we want.
Well, maybe we recommend that they designate someone to review our recommendations, meet with us, and then decide if a task force would be necessary or if one person is able to take some of this and disseminate the information to the appropriate people and gather the appropriate people from different areas. Because it sounds like this is going to be more than just BHA proper. It's going to go out into IT people, and some of our other recommendations go out to AG people. So it might be one person is the point person. Because we are summarizing in such brevity in this letter, conversation, I have no doubt, will provide more context and elaboration for them to be able to better understand what they have the capability of doing. It's my thought. But go big or go home. Isn't that what we're taught?
Well, and let's not put ourselves in a position to say, why didn't we think of that before when we did and we just didn't say
Right.
anything?
Right.
You know,
Jessica, when did we decide this was due?
It's due this month.
Okay. So maybe now that we've finished with this, we send it out and everyone can have one last chance to really read and dive through, and then maybe send comments by like Friday or Monday, and then it can be finalized, just because I think to sit and read it might produce some additional thought. And like Deanne just said, we might go, oh, why didn't I think of that before? I should have said something, and we could send comments.
Are we good with that? Do we want to delete this alternative solution? One of the things that Michelle and I came up with while we were going down the rabbit hole was like, what if we just have a statute change that requires law enforcement to report their M1s? We had a statute change that required EDs to report their M1s.
100%. And then consider we had a statute change that took LPCs and LCSWs and other intervening professionals off the 0.5, so that the only people who can sign the M0.5 now are law enforcement and EMS, which is exactly what that hold was created for. Do we just take law enforcement and EMS off the M1, or is there a reason they're on there?
EMS is not on the M1.
Sorry, on the M1.
Just law enforcement.
what about the consideration for those districts that use co-responders? I don't want to say they would play hot potato, but if somebody's got a district that has law enforcement and then there's co-responders, they could say, well, that's not part of us, that's them. And they'll say, no, that's not part of us, that's you. I don't want to get lost in translation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I honestly don't know every single co-responder in the state, but I do know that those that I have interacted with in multiple counties, that is their purpose and their understanding is the co-responders do the transport because they do have the law enforcement component and they will take it off the shoulders of regular patrol. But that's another rabbit hole we'd have to explain.
Yeah, because I know out in my area, I don't think it's like that. I think it's there's law enforcement and then a separate entity provides the co-responders.
Correct. But typically, if they're part of that co-response team, usually the law enforcement will help, but not always. That's what I was saying. I don't know
Yeah.
how we'd explain that. Law enforcement is still law enforcement under law enforcement statute regulations and requirements, whether they are co-response or patrol. That they are under the sheriff, they are under the police, they follow the state statutes for law enforcement, regardless of co-response or patrol.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So they should be following the same statutes regardless.
Quote unquote.
Should, in theory.
All right, what else on this? We have 1 minute left. Anything else we want to add to this?
I'm just saying take off the alternative solution part on that last part. So it's just in the meantime, a statutory change. Because it sounds like it's an either or.
Yes, agree. Good point.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a grammar error in the earlier one too, by the way. There's I can't remember where it was.
I'll send this out and you guys can
Perfect.
do whatever you need to do.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah. Thanks.